G'day ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Draw with Jazza. I'm Jazza and this is a review / comparison video between the Wacom Cintiq Companion 2 and the first generation Wacom Cintiq Companion. Now I'm hoping this video is going to be useful to those of you who are interested in upgrading from the first generation to a Companion 2 to see if it's worthwhile or what the difference is, and of course to people who are interested in any sort of Wacom Cintiq Companion products. I also want to thank Wacom for sponsoring this video in sending me the Cintiq Companion 2 for review and comparison. Now, if you're interested in seeing my original extensive in-depth review of the Wacom Cintiq Companion, check the link on the screen and in the description to go check it out. In that video, I go through all of the specs and my user experience at that time. And in this video, I want to start off by explaining how my experience has been over the past few years. The first gen Companion has been reliable and robust and has never let me down. And I've put it through some quite intense scenarios and rigs, and the utility that it provided was actually really impressive. So for example, the first gen Companion was my go-to streaming and recording device for my other YouTube / Twitch channel, Tabletop Time, where I play tabletop role-playing games with my friends. And the most intense rig that it ever handled at one time was at PAX, where it was handling 5 USB HD cameras and a USB document camera, as well as an external USB monitor and a USB mixer with 4 lav microphones hooked up through it, all while recording locally and streaming live on Twitch. So that's actually quite impressive. It's also been really reliable for my professional gigs, especially on location gigs. For example, there was a time I hosted a stream for Disney at a Star Wars fan event outside of the Sydney Opera House using a similar setup with external monitor, multiple cameras, lav microphone and more, and all of it was done live and on location, all made possible with the Cintiq Companion. So all in all, it's been an amazing device. It's had a lot of grunt to it. It's been really reliable and solid, but the only area that I felt it could have improved in was how it ran digital art programs like Photoshop and Animate CC and Flash. Now, when I say this, I really need to explain that I'm very picky. So it's not that it wasn't handling these programs, it actually ran them fine. But as a professional animator and illustrator who uses these programs every day on a very powerful computer at home, I tend to be a little bit spoiled. So I knew from the very beginning of getting my first generation Cintiq Companion that it would not compete with the power and the processing power for these art programs that my home studio rig does. And I don't want to discredit the device at all. It always ran the programs fine, but it was just a little bit, I suppose you could say, sticky. It's not like it was massively laggy or anything terrible, but it did hold me back just a little bit, just enough to be a little bit frustrating for it to not feel like my go-to travel device when animating or using Photoshop. So this brings me to the Cintiq Companion 2. I knew earlier this year that I would be doing a lot of traveling this year, which I have been doing, and that's why I contacted Wacom and asked if we could do this video, because I really wanted to use the Cintiq Companion 2 to see if it boosts my speed and workflow in these art programs, and it absolutely did. Now I'm going to go into detail into that later, but what I want to do at the very beginning is compare the Cintiq Companion 2 to the original Cintiq Companion, starting off with a few interesting specs and stats, and I'm also going to show you the benchmarks I did and directly compare the performance of the two in the simple tests and stress tests that I did. Now the Cintiq Companion 2 comes in various little options, so depending on your budget or the performance needs that you have, you can get one with an Intel i3, i5 or i7 processor and with varying RAM. Now I really wanted something that packs a lot of punch because I have a lot of demands with the programs that I use and the intensity with which I use them. So I got the top tier, which is the Intel i7 processor, which is the next generation from the previous Cintiq Companion model, and it has 16 gig of RAM. And a few other differences between the two: the first gen Companion has 2 USB 3 ports and the Cintiq Companion 2 has 3 USB 3 ports. Now I know there's an economy of how many USB ports you can have on a portable device, but having the extra USB 3 port has been a lifesaver. Another major difference between the two devices is that the first gen Companion ran on 1080p, while the Cintiq Companion 2 ran on QHD, and the difference in the resolution and the image quality is absolutely huge. And besides that, it also gives you a lot more room on your canvases in digital art programs when working on the device, which is a huge bonus for artists because then your tools take up less space on the screen. There are other differences between the two devices, but those are the main ones that I really care about and wanted to cover. The device also has some differences in its design, namely the on and off button and the case that comes with it, but I'll cover these later in the video. Now, for the purposes of this video review and comparison, I've run a bunch of different benchmarks on the two devices at once, so you can directly compare performance and functionality between the two devices. The first benchmark I ran on the two devices was the AIDA64 Extreme benchmark. I also ran the Unigine Heaven benchmark to stress test and compare the GPU of both of the devices. And on top of those hardware benchmarks, I also ran a personal little test where I drew the same image on both devices, and I ran Photoshop on both devices while using some hardware monitoring software and using a stopwatch to time the duration that it took to create the illustration on both devices. So I'm going to go through each of these tests one by one to explain the results. One of the most interesting and telling things about running the benchmarks was that even in installing and opening the benchmarks, the Cintiq Companion 2 ran at least twice as fast in every single example. The Cintiq Companion 2 massively outperformed the first gen Cintiq Companion in the AIDA64 Extreme benchmark tests. And I'm going to be completely blunt, I'm not one for the details. I don't really know what all the technically thingies mean, but what I do know in my very primitive experience and knowledge is that the Cintiq 2 was a lot faster and better. Now, the Unigine Heaven benchmark test was the most telling in this capacity because you could see side by side how much of a difference the graphics processing of the Cintiq Companion 2 was outperforming the first generation tablet. While the Cintiq Companion 2 isn't a gaming PC and was running a stress test graphics processing benchmark at about an average of 15 frames a second, which as gamers know isn't that impressive, the first gen Cintiq Companion was running the same stress test at 3 frames per second. So as you can still tell, massively being outperformed by the Cintiq Companion 2. But these are stress tests and meant to push them to their limits and test how far they can go, but they're not actual games. And as you can see in my original review of the Cintiq Companion first gen, I could adequately play Dota 2 on low settings without a problem, just with a little bit of frame latency and lag, which you would expect on a laptop anyway. So that being the case, I would expect my Cintiq Companion 2 to run Dota on low settings very easily, if not medium settings without a problem. That being said, I've actually been careful to keep my Cintiq Companion 2 very free and clean of any unnecessary software or games, which I didn't do for my original Cintiq Companion. I just put on everything I thought I would like to have and use. With my Cintiq Companion 2, because I specifically want it to function the best it possibly can in all of my work scenarios, I've kept it completely clean of everything except the work programs that I want to use. So that's why I haven't installed any games on that. Speaking of which, now we get to the Photoshop usage comparison test. And this is easily the clearest demonstration of what I was trying to explain earlier in the video. As you can see, in using the Cintiq Companion first generation, it runs Photoshop fine. I was still able to produce the image that I wanted to produce. Do keep in mind that both images are more technical tests rather than illustrative, wonderful demos, so they're not very pretty. But that being said, I could use my custom Photoshop brushes in a very high resolution Photoshop file without any major problems. But when I say that the Photoshop program itself is just a little bit sticky, that doesn't mean that it ran with a huge amount of lag or anything like that, but it did slow the process down. So to directly compare the results of these tests, my illustration on the first generation Cintiq Companion took me close to 10 minutes to do. Now, this wasn't with any major freezes. Every now and then there would be a slight stickiness or slight lag to an undo or a redo, or to applying fills or clipping masks or anything like that, but only to a really small degree. And the only reason I notice it so much is because I work very fast when I'm working with Photoshop. I'm used used to trying to hit deadlines, so I'm constantly trying to push the pace as much as possible. So I actually don't think this would be a major problem to people who aren't full-time professionals who work in these programs. But that being said, the results speak for themselves. When I ran the same test on the Cintiq Companion 2, drawing the same illustration in the same way, in the same steps, you can see that the strokes are drawn much more in real time. There's much less latency and the experience becomes so much more natural. While the drawing experience on the original Cintiq Companion didn't necessarily feel laggy, it just felt that little bit held back. But the experience of using my Cintiq Companion 2 to draw and do artwork has become exactly what I was hoping for in the upgrade to my Cintiq Companion 2, which is completely effortless, seamless, and comfortable. It felt natural. But the most telling thing in all of this, of course, is the result, and the time it took to create the illustration on the Cintiq Companion 2 was about 6 minutes and 40 seconds. Now, of course, this isn't a perfect test. There is the possibility of human error. I might have just been making less mistakes when I was working on the Cintiq Companion 2, but even accounting for that, there was minimally a quarter to a third of speed that was gained when working on the Cintiq Companion 2. So I started off this video by explaining my experience of using the first generation Cintiq Companion, and I've just finished going through my different tests and comparisons. Now I want to share my personal experience in using the Cintiq Companion 2. And to help give you an idea as to how much this matters to me, I should first explain that I have a massively tight schedule at the moment. I have 2 deadlines in July, one for a 10-minute animated short for Google and Screen Australia, and the other for a book to be published in the US. And on top of that, I'm handling my YouTube channel and a whole bunch of other stuff on the side. So I'm like really crazy working hard all the time to try and keep afloat just with all the work that I have. Now, I've been working to this level of intensity for over 6 months, and I have quite a few months left to go until I reach that deadline. And as you can tell, something like that would burn someone out and has meant many early mornings and late nights in the office. But when I got my Cintiq Companion 2, not only did it enable me to keep up with the deadlines and schedule that I've given myself through traveling and other experiences, but it actually allowed me to finally, first time in years, take a holiday. So I went with my family up to Cairns in the north of Australia just for a week, and in that week I worked for about half the time and kept up with my schedule while also taking time off to go for a swim or enjoy the sunshine or go for a meal out in the town. And this is a luxury I could not afford if I didn't have the portability of bringing my work with me. And not only that, I wouldn't have enjoyed it if there was anything that would have made that work experience slower or more frustrating than I would have hoped for, which is why the Cintiq Companion absolutely has my vote of approval, because the entire working experience was completely free and effortless. There was no latency, there was nothing holding back the work pace that I really needed to keep up with these deadlines that I have. So that was an absolute lifesaver, that I could work at the pace that I needed to while traveling, while on holiday, and while on business trips. Now, that being said, I don't always have a holiday or a business trip on my schedule. So does that mean that I don't use the Cintiq Companion outside of those times? The answer is absolutely not. In fact, I've actually found that with the added functionality and performance of the Cintiq Companion 2, I'm using the device a lot more, and it frees me up to work on the extra little bits of work that I would need to do normally at 6 a.m. or at 9 in the evening to actually do in the house while I watch a movie with my wife, which completely transforms the mentality of a working artist from being someone in crunch mode to being someone who can take their work from their desk and in their office to a much more comfortable and relaxing environment. And the pace of the work, while being slowed slightly just because I was relaxing more than I would be in my office, the pace of the work for the device itself wasn't hindered at all. And that has been a major addition to my workflow. Now, there are a couple of other minor changes in the design between the first gen and the Cintiq Companion 2 that I wanted to cover. The first is the way the on-off button works, and the second is the carrying case itself. In the first gen model of the Cintiq Companion, the on-off button was a button that you press in and it was on the side of the device. Whereas now on the Cintiq Companion 2, it's a little clicky switch that you pull in, hold down, and let go to turn the device on and off. This very small design change has has made more of a difference than you would know. Because with the first gen Cintiq Companion, if I was flying or traveling and I put the device in a case and in my bag, often that button would be pressed while I was moving around, and sometimes by the time I would get on the flight and be ready to open it up and start working, unbeknownst to me, it had been on for the last hour or two and been draining battery without me using it. And that was really frustrating at times. Whereas now that the on-off button has been changed to a very specific switch that you click in and let go of, it completely eliminates from that being a problem. So we can see here that the attention to refining the design of the device has been very careful from Wacom's part, so kudos to them. Besides that, the other major change to the design aspect of the Wacom Cintiq Companion was the case. Now I'm going to be honest, when I first saw the case that the Companion 2 comes with, I wasn't sure whether I liked it or not. And that's only because I really liked the case for the first gen Companion. But it wasn't long at all until I realized how much better the new case is. The meshy, stretchy material that the original carrying case came with, though very nice to the touch and very comfortable to carry around, wasn't particularly protective of the tablet and also opened on the side, which meant that when I carried it in my carrying case for flights or for travel, meant I had to pull the whole case to get the device out. Whereas the new carrying case for the Cintiq Companion 2 has a little bit more of a denim feel to it and feels much more firm and a little more rigid in its construct, which is actually very nice. It makes it feel much more secure and protected while being compact and comfortable to hold. But the major and most positive change in the carrying case is that the opening is in the long side of the case, which means that when you put it into a carrying case or a laptop bag, it opens upright and you don't need to pull out everything to get the tablet out. You simply unzip and pull out your Cintiq Companion. So those are a few of the design changes, and that is my comparison. All in all, the overall design of the tablet is very close, if not almost identical to the original tablet. It's just some of these specs that have changed and a few of these design features. So was it worth the upgrade from the first gen Companion to a Companion 2, and how different is it? Well, hopefully this video has shown you that the difference in performance alone between the higher tier Cintiq Companion 2 and the original first gen Cintiq Companion is huge. Massive difference in performance, and the way that that affects the comfort and use and mental freedom and relaxation while working in very intense and high powered scenarios and programs, the difference can't be understated. So in my personal experience, the difference was phenomenal and has made a massive difference to my workflow. So who is the Cintiq Companion 2 for? It's definitely for me, but is it for you? Well, that depends on your workflow, but if you find that you're short on time, or you're traveling a lot, or you have tight schedules and you want to do more work at home after your work at work, absolutely this device is for you. Budget is of course one of the first major concerns for people when they buy a Cintiq product. But the reality is I would never recommend a Cintiq device to someone who is on a tight budget and isn't a developed artist yet. Having amazing tools do not make you a better artist. But having said that, these are amazing tools. And I swear by my Cintiq products. I use my 27QHD every day, and I love it more and more every day. I use my Wacom Cintiq Companion 2 now every day, and I swear by it. So I absolutely recommend this product for people who need the reliable functionality on the go or in the off time. So the final verdict is 2 thumbs up for the Wacom Cintiq Companion 2. I don't want this to have come across as a dissing video of the first gen Cintiq Companion, because the last 2 years of using the device has been reliable and great. But the added power and guts that this new Cintiq Companion 2 has completely bridges the gap between a device that is functional and usable and one that is powerful enough to remove technology from the artistic process as being an issue. It's completely become about the artistic tools and the creation process. And that is when beauty happens. When technology is intuitive and powerful enough to step out of the way so that we can focus on the creation and the art itself. And I'm so happy with this device. Thank you so much to Wacom for sponsoring the video. I'm hoping this has been interesting or informative to any of you who have been looking at these devices. And if you want to check out my previous Wacom Companion review, there's a link in the description to that as well. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and until next time, I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for new content every week. If you want to support my work and get some goodies for yourself, head over to my store for archives, ebooks, digital brushes, video courses, and more. If you enjoyed this video, here's a link to some more content you might like. Draw with Jazza is proudly sponsored by Adobe. Join the Creative Cloud today and get loads of incredible industry-standard creative tools such as Photoshop, Animate, Premiere Pro, and other apps for your computer or mobile device. That's it for now. Thanks for joining the arty party, and until next time, I'll see you later.